Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Morning Sam, Morning Ralph. And today we've got a really special guest. It's Olga Lopategui, and she is the restaurant loyalty guru. She comes so highly recommended by so many people. In some ways, you can't escape her influence on the loyalty game. So we're really pleased to have her here today as our guest. Olga,
Thank,
welcome to the show.
thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it. I'd like to know that I may be a loyalty guru, but just in the restaurant space. So we work exclusively with restaurants. You asked me about loyalty in retail and airlines, anywhere else. I'm reasonably clueless. Restaurants is the thing we work on.
Let's get right into it, because one of the things that I've heard you say before, and I've read about you also, it's one of the core principles of what you do is you find out what customers really like, and then you figure out a way to give them more of that at scale, right?
Yep, that's part of the idea. And when I started loyalty consulting, restaurant loyalty special, I've had a lot of experience with loyalty in my corporate life, and a lot of it was a little bit flashy. It was all about building emotional connection, which is absolutely wonderful. It's about getting guests what they want, meeting them where they are, but it wasn't clear to me what does it actually mean.
Yeah.
How do you actually make it happen? It's one wonderful sentences, but what do you actually do? And so when I started the company, I was trying to figure out how do you actually make it happen, not just talk about it. So
Now, this company, let's just take a step back. Your company is Restaurant Loyalty Specialists, right?
yep,
Let's get into restaurant loyalty programs. Seems like they're table stakes nowadays.
yep.
Why do they matter?
Why do they matter? I'll be the first to say that a restaurant chain doesn't absolutely have to have a loyalty program. It's a wonderful addition to your toolkit. It's not the only thing that you absolutely have to have. It's one additional tool. If you do everything else, you probably don't even need a loyalty program.
Yeah.
But if you're excelling at your loyalty program, it's a very strong advantage. So don't have to have it. If you do it, you better do it. That's my 2 cents on it.
Because that's just it. One of the things I want to cover in this pod today is the pitfalls behind not doing it well. Because, like you mentioned, if the brand really does its job and fulfills its promise, you create a brand, you resonate with your customer, you know who your target customer is, you know what your value proposition is, you make that connection. The loyalty program really turns more into kind of like a reward. It's more like a rewards program, right?
Yeah, I treat loyalty programs as an additional marketing channel. So any restaurant brand has to have some way of marketing to their guests. It's a restaurant or retail, right? And if you look at the world of retail, there are plenty of successful retail brands that do not have loyalty programs. And they survive just fine, but they have very solid CRM and they market to their guests without a loyalty program underneath. I think in today's world, a CRM is absolutely essential. To targeting through own channels to your guests is absolutely essential. Loyalty is one of the ways to get there faster, more efficient. It's not the only way. You could get guest information through a reservation system. You could get it through your online ordering, properly package it and use it for your marketing and retargeting. There are multiple ways to get that data into CDP, but you have to have an own marketing channel. Loyalty is one of the easiest ways to get there if you do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to follow up on that thought about, okay, if you have a loyalty program, you have to do it well. Because it is a marketing channel and it's a very important marketing channel. And generally speaking, how many people do you need in a loyalty program before you can really move the needle or create real traction?
Well, how many depends on how many restaurants you have, right? So it's relative. So my guideline is if you have less than a couple thousand people per store, you're probably not making a lot of impact. So once you're getting to 4 or 5,000 people per store, that's when the magic is starting to happen. Another way to look at it is participation rate. So it's a percentage of transactions attributed to loyalty sales. So if you have 100 transactions on a day, you want at least 15 of those to be attributed to loyalty, because that's like the magic numbers, like roughly 1 in 8. And even if you think from operational perspective, your cashier or server, when they ask, "Hey, are you a member of loyalty?" If they get 7 no's and 1 yes, that's still directionally tolerable. When you get 9 no's and 1 yes, you just stop asking, right? And if you
Right,
stop asking, they stop enrolling. So you got to get to that 15, 20% as quickly as possible, and then it's going to maintain momentum.
right, right. Because it's, you know, getting folks into the loyalty program, that's one thing. And that's one hurdle that a restaurant has to jump over. But then it's about doing loyalty right, right? Making sure the rewards are appropriate or matched with the user. So, how much of what you do helps restaurants determine what those offers should be so
Mhm.
that they're really maximizing the program?
Yeah, so there is a lot of science to it and a little bit of art to it. I'd say more science than art, and a lot of common sense that sometimes you have to fight.
Common sense
Um,
sometimes, right?
yes, I think one of the challenges I run into often with my clients is sometimes program managers overestimate the importance of those programs to consumers. The
Mm.
attention span of an average consumer is not very high, and they don't have as much time to invest into figuring out your complicated loyalty program. So the simpler, the better. Drilling that into into the program managers and management, particularly upper management, the simpler is better. That battle with the client is quite complicated at times, but everybody always wins when the program is simpler. It's easier to run, it's easier to understand, and so on. Then speak about personalization and getting the right reward for the right guest. That part is also fairly complicated. So when you think about loyalty programs, there are two big components, right? One is the base program. So this is
Hmm.
what we tell everybody: you guys are gonna get this many points for this much spend, or you're gonna get exchange these points for some specific menu items, and you're gonna get this thing for your birthday offer. So all of that is preset. It's the same for everyone. And that part needs to be right, and the incentives have to be set up in a way that guests spend more, come more often. Because believe it or not, it's possible to set it up in a way that people spend less and come less frequently. It's hard to get it that way, but it's possible. We've seen that. It's more often. You'd be surprised. Spend less is more common, but come less frequently also happens.
So
But
you're really when you're trying to factor in the loyalty program, where do you start? Are you starting with what's our objective here? Do we want to get more people into the stores, or do we want to do more top line revenue? I mean,
and usually everybody wants everything at once, and it doesn't work that way. I forget whose expression that was, but I love it. It says priorities are like arms. Have you heard that one?
okay,
Priorities
no,
are like arms. If you think that you have more than two, you're either lying or crazy. Yeah. So you can't really drive more than one or two things at once. So you got to pick what's important for your brand right this moment. And most of the time, the priorities will pull you in different directions and you're going to get nothing. So you got to decide, what are we doing? And then you stick with it for a year. This year, we're driving spend lift, increase in spending among loyalty guests, and you push everything in that direction. Next year, we're trying to drive frequency. Okay, what do we do to drive frequency? And then you can get more fancy. You can split your database and say, hey, these people are going to drive spam, these people are going to drive frequency. But on average, everything will stay the same because when you blend them together, you move this part that way, you move this part the other way. It's not going to go up everywhere. It's going to level each other out.
that's right.
Right? Yeah.
That's right. And it's interesting what you're saying about, okay, so you pick an objective and you start with that. Maybe you have objective 1A and then a secondary objective that is still there. Most people want two things, a
Yeah,
primary and a secondary.
five.
That's
More often five.
more
Um,
often five, but you feel like you could probably do kill two
Yeah,
birds with
you
one
can usually
stone.
do a couple as long as they're not pointing in completely different directions.
But one of the big tools and doing so, it's one thing to have the loyalty application, and you're building an application that you're hoping is not hoping, but you're designing it with your customer in mind, the look, the
Hmm.
feel, the brand, the messaging, the vibe, and the rewards are all being pushed towards meeting or building upon that objective. Now, with that in mind, you have the app, you have a CRM. Also mentioned something about a CDP, a
Yep.
customer data platform.
Yep.
And then you have probably a loyalty provider too, that's like counting the points and the rewards and doing all
Hmm.
that back end stuff. Olga, what are the different components that go into a
Like a
loyalty tech stack? Yeah.
typical tech stack. So typical loyalty tech stack. Actually, typical depends on the size of the brand, right? So if you have less than a dozen stores, my recommendation normally would be just start out with building your loyalty program within your point of sale provider option. Most of them will have some kind of basic structure, like Toast will have it, Travel has it. A lot of modern loyalty programs have a loyalty module. Modern point of sale programs have it, and that will just be it, and it'll serve for a
Okay.
smaller chain. When you're looking at larger brands that actually have substantial database where it makes sense to start segmentation because segments are large enough to make a difference. They're not so tiny that it doesn't really matter. Then you start looking at a proper stack. And in those cases, you want to have, I'm starting from loyalty because that's where I exist. So
Of
you
course.
want to have a loyalty platform at the center of your loyalty stack. That loyalty platform most of the time will provide you with marketing automation, meaning it will be allow you to send emails, send text messages, send push notifications into your loyalty app, which may be a white label app or it may be built by a third party provider that you bring in or your agency brings in to work with the loyalty platform. For larger brands, typically you'll have a different marketing automation platform because those tend to have more functionality than the loyalty platforms themselves. Loyalty platforms are good at segmentation, they're excellent at counting points, keeping track of who earned what, issuing rewards. But
Yep.
marketing automation is not as phenomenal in those as platforms designed for that. And then once you get to a larger scale, CDP, customer data platform, becomes more important because that allows you to store customer information beyond the loyalty program. One of the downsides of a loyalty program, for example, loyalty platform, is that if you it'll gather all the data on your loyalty customers.
Yep.
However, some of those loyalty customers they might forget to scan in with their codes when they showed up, and it wouldn't capture the transaction if it wasn't attributed to this guest. Your CDP may be able to capture that. So this guest may be calling into customer support line to complain about whatever. That data will not go automatically into your loyalty platform because if it didn't go through the app, it's not getting captured directly into your loyalty platform.
Oh,
Typically, you will not know, so that profile will not contain that information. Right?
all right. So let's say here's a question for you that I've seen from time to time on different apps, sometimes restaurants and sometimes even in things like Amazon Alexa, which I know is not
Mhm.
your expertise. Oh
No,
shoot, I said app. I
did
said
it just beep at you?
it beeped. I was like, I did it. I can't believe I said it.
You said it.
But do you ever notice? And I'm asking a loyalty app expert here. Do you ever notice when a loyalty program asks you these seemingly random, innocuous questions? What do you prefer, 5 card poker or mahjong?
No,
And
my
it's
loyalty program never asked me that. Or at least none of the restaurant ones.
all right. It probably isn't so much a restaurant ones would be more like fries or a shake. But the idea is that these seemingly innocent, random questions are automatically feeding the brand information about you that you can infer. Or if
Mhm.
I play if I'm all about poker versus mahjong, that might infer certain information about me, maybe my age, my yes, everything else. Um, is that I'm wondering,
Mhm.
is that something that restaurants should do more of to understand their guests so they can get better insights about who their customer is?
Yeah, I think there is some room to play there, but I haven't seen anybody doing it well, and I haven't seen anyone yet creating a comprehensive approach to this types of questions in the restaurant
Mm,
space. My attitude to those types of questions to try to get to know the guest better. I think that for most guests, your behavior tells us everything we need to know about you. I There is a McDonald's that they just built very close to my house that provides Happy Meals for my two children. That McDonald's should know by now that I usually get two Happy Meals every time I go. And then there is usually at least one adult meal and sometimes two because usually it's for my husband. And every now and then I'll break down and just buy it for myself.
yeah,
I think they don't have to ask how many family members are there. They should know it by now. They
right.
shouldn't ask what kind of food these family members like because very consistently we buy more or less the same stuff. They should know that we try to be good and get diet soda, but it is possible to convince us to get a milkshake every now and then because every now and then we'll get a milkshake. And they
Right.
should know by now that it's virtually impossible to sell any vanilla because it's always chocolate or strawberry. So why ask me if I'm a chocolate or a strawberry person at this point? You know it from my behavior, right?
That's a very good point, and a very and yeah, there should be enough information just from ordering
From the
past
existing
behaviors
business. Yeah.
that really informs you
Yes.
on that. But so then what's the point then of certain things like gamification, right?
Well,
To keep you on the app longer? Is that what
mhm.
that is? Or
Yes, keep you on the app longer is a wonderful idea. The gamification, when it's done well, is which is difficult to do, and not many brands actually do it well because that's for your technology audience. It's really not there. Lots of apps are not really designed to do
yeah,
gamification that is compatible with what on Steam right now. So as a casual gamer, it always shocks me how well those people keep my attention versus the clients that I work with on the apps because the badging, the achievements, the excitement that they build is just very different from what we accomplish. And unfortunately, in the restaurant industry, there's got to be ways to make it more fun and more engaging.
it's
Um,
true. I have to wonder, and this is me thinking out loud, like the crazy person that I could be. But if you look at some of these amazing games that are out there, imagine reskinning these games with a restaurant brand
mm,
and just KFC. You have a pick Candyland, whatever the hell it's called, Candy Crush or whatever, and
mhm.
Candy Crush decides to white label it, and all of a sudden, all of the candy pieces and everything else is becomes KFC. And would that not
Yes,
be a hell of a
and,
co-brand and a hell of
and,
an
and you
opportunity?
play when you play, and if you turn like a casino game, if you win this round within this time frame, you get whatever a free piece of chicken or a free soda. But it has to be a legit play. It
Yeah,
cannot be poorly done. It has to be
yeah.
compatible.
That's why
Enough,
you work
you know,
with a
proper game.
Zynga, you work with an EA, you work with an Activision. Some of these brands are large enough when the clout is large enough and the budgets are large enough
Yeah,
where they can actually do that. So this is all
these are
free of
not cheap.
charge,
Like
by the way.
yeah.
All of these ideas that I'm giving, this is all, use this as you see fit.
Yeah, all that gamification is it's difficult to execute, and
Yeah,
it's also one of the challenges with it is that it's very hard to calculate the ROI with on the back end because engagement doesn't translate into sales most of the time. And the
Right.
investment is very high. We know that over time, engagement translates into sales because engagement means top of mind, means awareness. It means that the sales are going to come from there. But
That's
it is
right.
very, very hard to do direct attribution. And those programs are so expensive, tend to be so expensive, that that's a blocker for a lot of mid-sized chains.
Absolutely. Olga, I had a question that wasn't part of our show notes, but my feeling is you probably know something about this. And that's, this idea of share of wallet in the phone.
Mhm.
So we all have phones and we all
Yep.
have the Apple, your credit cards are in there and my
Yep.
CVS
The
card is
wallets.
in there.
Yeah. Mhm.
How big? That's a big deal to get in that. Is that a major component to the tell me a little, how do you get in there and what does it mean?
Um, how do you get on there? So getting mobile wallets. Okay, I'll step back. So apps. For the longest time, the world was ruled by apps.
Right.
So you have a loyalty program, you have to have an app. And I think it still plays a very substantial role, particularly for the frequent users. People that come to your restaurant regularly, they will continue to want to use the app, even if they don't open it very often. It's got your orders saved, you know exactly where the buttons are. So it's much more convenient. It's laid out. If it's laid out well, it's laid out in a way that it's easier to use the app than navigate through mobile web. But yeah, it wins hands down. For infrequent users, having the ability to use a mobile wallet card is a really attractive options, because there will be people that will never download the app or download and forget about it and will never touch it. And there's more and more of those as more and more programs appear. So
Yeah.
I think it's not really either or. You really have to have both. If you can't afford an app, a good app, then you probably should have a mobile wallet. But having an app, it's better than nothing, because there are some brands out there that just have check-in at the cash register, right? Particularly fast casual brands where there is no app, there is no mobile wallet. It's just you punch in your phone number
Yeah.
when you buy your food, and that's, to me, that's one of the worst ways of doing it, because it doesn't change your behavior. You're just like, oh yeah, I have a loyalty program when you're already there. It doesn't drive you at all.
No, it's not the driver that you
No,
probably.
not the driver. It makes you feel better after the purchase, maybe, but it doesn't drive your behavior at all. So
Yeah,
you got to be able to get into their messages, to get on the push notifications and email. You got to increase that top of mind somehow,
that's
whichever
right.
method you
Basically,
find.
so the app becomes this, it's a primary channel, but it's all of these smaller sort of tributaries that the app is central to.
Yeah, it's like every little thing helps, right?
Yeah,
And you can't do absolutely every little thing. You need to balance what is the cost of doing that thing and maintaining that thing versus what the majority of your guests are going to do. Yeah, it would be wonderful to have all of it, and you probably can if you're Chipotle. But if you are not Chipotle, you have 100 units, you cannot do everything. Just do three or four most
you
best
can't.
things.
No, it's a fact. I was in the one of the things. There's an app. I'd love to get your opinion on some of these loyalty programs and apps that you think are fantastic. I'll pick one for one of my favorites is the Chick-fil-A app.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily because I'm a gigantic fan of Chick-fil-A, but I am a gigantic fan of knowing what's in my food. And one of the things that Chick-fil-A does extraordinarily well and has me reconsidering them every single time I want it to go fast cash is that I can select the menu items and I can see very clearly the nutrition and what happens when I eliminate something or add something
Yeah,
in, or I mean, what happens to the carb count, what happens to the
yeah,
protein count, all of it is completely dynamic. And so there's like a level of uh, depth
yeah.
that some of these apps have that are so sophisticated that I feel like it's beyond a loyalty app now. It's also in some ways educating me.
Yep.
Do you have any other? Are there any apps that come to mind that in your opinion, that have that sort of special something that
Special.
just like for yourself that you really like? Let me.
Well,
Let me
I
follow that.
mentioned Chipotle. I mentioned Chipotle because we had Chipotle for lunch today.
Okay.
There is a Chipotle which is further away than McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, which are very close. It's a traffic light away. Is Chipotle. We use Chipotle a lot, and the reason we do it is not so much because of the points and below the underlying loyalty program, but it's because of the convenience of Chipotle, and because it makes it very easy to save your preferred items.
I love that.
My husband, who's usually the runner for Chipotle, so he is able to say, "Hey, I'm doing a Chipotle run. And we work. He works downstairs. I'm upstairs." So he will text me, "I'm going to Chipotle. I'm gonna say my usual with chicken or my usual with beef." And there are two of the usuals.
Yeah.
And he'll just click it while he's on a conference call. He can get there and back in about 7 minutes. And he knows that he's going to be back. He can run out during a very short break on his meeting or stay on the call. He knows he doesn't have to talk to anybody. He can, if he's on the call, he may continue working while he's picking up the food. And that convenience, it just wins over a lot of other brands.
It just really does. We do that too, where we're a Chipotle house and my kids are all teenagers. And so they're generally getting the same thing. But what I love about it is I can change the name of each order. So I'm always like giving them like usually sometimes really rude and crude nicknames.
We're not at that level yet with my kids. They're a little early.
Yeah. My kids, I get that's another story entirely. That's interesting. All right, listen, we're going to take a quick break. When you come back, I want to get into hate to tell you, but right. And that's an opportunity for you to debunk a myth in loyalty. So This has been awesome. We'll be back in 2 shakes. All right, everybody, we're back. I'm here with Olga Lopategui. She is our restaurant loyalty expert from Restaurant Loyalty Specialists. Works with some of the greatest brands in the world on their loyalty programs. It's an honor and a privilege to have her today. Olga, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about busting a myth about restaurant loyalty. So can you give me your hate to tell you but?
Okay, so my hate to tell you but is that the term loyalty program is incorrect. Loyalty programs should be called rewards programs. Okay. Because loyalty programs do not generate loyalty in any way, shape, or form. Loyalty programs are here to reinforce behavior with rewards, but loyalty is created in the restaurant, in the quality of operations, in the service, in the quality of food. But you cannot generate loyalty through a loyalty program. So the name is wrong, but it sounds sexier, so we have to use it.
I love it. Yes, that's a terrific hate to tell you, but.
It's very sad. It's very sad.
It's sad. It's a little sad for the marketers out there. I'm sure they're all shedding tears. But the reality is, you're right. We're rewarding behavior. It's a behavioral app.
Yep.
And then the trick is really to try to figure out what behaviors, what triggers positive behaviors.
And the way that we view loyalty I view it as loyalty program is there as an incentive for the guests to share their information. So when they check in with the loyalty app, they tell you, "Hey, this is my transaction." That allows us as marketers to say, "Hey, Paul likes Big Macs or a specific type of Chipotle bowl, etc." So we gather information about the guest. And if we're doing everything right, that allows us to send you better marketing. So if you hate pork, we're never going to touch you with pork. You are gluten-free, you're never going to see any gluten. You don't have kids, you're never going to see a kids eat free promotion, right? Yeah. So if you give us data through this program, we give you better marketing. Better marketing ensures you open the emails more, you open push notifications. You remember more about us. And then next time you come back, you give us more data. We know even more about you and we target you even better. So that's what it's all about. And the actual base program is just a very small, important, but small part of it.
So, Olga, I have to ask the obligatory AI question.
Yep.
It wouldn't be a podcast if the two letters AI were not mentioned out loud. So, how does AI fit into all of this? The most obvious thing to me that comes into play is like order suggestions. Is that AI or is that machine learning? Because it feels what is it?
This is like I'm the wrong person to ask about the differentiation between AI and machine learning. Like I would trust my own answer on that. But I think that the biggest change in the restaurant space was, or at least in my CRM loyalty space with AI, is going to be that it's going to be substantially easier to create personalized recommendations. Segmentation should become much easier and much more targeted, and it's also should become much easier very soon to create experimentation, personalization at scale. We're doing some of it already, but when you do manual campaign deployments, it's harder to go beyond 30, 40 segments deployed at the same time.
Yeah.
When you go into because you got to create them, you got to figure out what kind of messaging, what are the differences in messaging between those segments. Then you got to measure them all one by one, see which ones did what. So it's a lot of work, right?
Right.
So doing it with assistance of an AI or machine learning tool that allows you to segment faster, grab the insights, hopefully correct ones, and get the reporting. And then you potentially would be able to provide free-form inquiry to it. Hey, I think that these people do this. Is that true or not based on the data? Because right now you have to crunch it in SQL painfully.
Yeah.
Not for me, at least.
No, same.
You should be able to ask that question in free form. And I think once we get there, that's going to be very exciting. None of my clients are able to do that yet.
It's interesting just within the last day, last 48 hours with the news that's come out with regard to DeepSeek, with this localized AI where you can literally create these imagine these miniature distilled AI that is super highly specialized. Like you can create one just for the loyalty program that takes all that information and then you're able to query that and understand very easily without SQL. That should be that's
In some ways, it already exists. Like, because I work with Gemini from my work, and I have pre-built the Gemini scripts for different purposes, and I use them for the repeated tasks that I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's more shallow version of it, but yeah, that should exist.
But that's all you need because you're really
For
almost
individual
looking directionally.
tasks. Yeah, like it would be nicer than if you were asking the tool a question and it would know which one of those sub scripts to apply by itself. But because right now I have to select them down from the menu, but it's not a big effort, right?
Yeah. Hey, Olga, let's switch gears real quick. I would love for you to before we say our goodbyes, I would love for you to share an example of a restaurant that you think successfully turned its loyalty program around. Maybe you can, if you know of one that, remember how we even started this conversation, it can be like if you don't do your loyalty right, that's a problem. So what were they doing? And if you don't want to name names, that's fine. But what were they doing wrong? And then what did they do to successfully steer themselves right?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to mention here is that with the loyalty programs, it's virtually impossible to say what's happening unless you're on the inside. It's you can't really judge the performance of the loyalty program based on just outwards how well it's functioning from a customer perspective, because it may be phenomenally convenient, but driving crazy discounting in the background without any incrementality, you wouldn't be able to say until you actually dive under the hood. So people ask me which programs work well. Well, I know which ones say that they work well, and then 3 years later, oh no, we're going to change provider, we're going to change the structure. Maybe it wasn't that glamorous. Maybe it was, you don't know. So I can judge the customer interface, but it's very hard to judge how well the program performs from the business perspective when you are on the outside. In terms of programs that turn themselves around, I can only speak about our clients or former clients.
Yeah.
And I'll try to stay away from the names here for confidentiality reasons. But one of the very common things that we see is loyalty programs where guests that are loyal inside the program are spending less than guests from the street. And it's very disappointing. It's very, very annoying when you have those precious loyalty members that are 15 to 20% of your population, and they keep on spending less than other guys. You can't tell that from the outside, right? But when you dive under the hood, you're like, yep,
Right.
they're definitely spending less. They're coming in more frequently, but they're spending less. So in some cases, it's the program structure that drives that type of behavior. In some cases, a reward creates an incremental visit.
Yeah.
Like when somebody gets to earn a reward from their previous purchases, it creates an incremental visit, but the program either allows or incentivizes that guest to just come in, grab their free whatever, and run. So that visit doesn't create incremental sales. Extremely common, particularly with QSRs. You never want that to happen. So you want to make that reward smaller and more frequent and expiring faster so they don't stack them up. So every time they come in to use the reward, they have to spend at least another $5 or $6.
So an
So then that's
expiration date, right?
incremental. You put an expiration date and you make sure it's not enough to make a meaningful purchase. Because if your average ticket is $12 and your reward is 10, you're probably going to have people come in and spend $10 and maybe spend the reward and maybe pay 99 cents in tax.
Yeah.
And you're not making anything from that incremental visit. So make it $5 maximum if your average is 10. And that's built on the program structure. So things like that make a difference. Over discounting makes a difference. So sometimes we'll see brands that don't realize that they're sending multiple discounts to the same people over and over again, and sometimes they overlap and stack. And often they don't even know that people can come in and stack discounts. You think they had a 20% off, they only had 40 plus because they stuck two 20s, and nobody really realized that was happening, sometimes for years. So,
Sometimes for years.
Sometimes for years, yeah.
Yeah,
Depends on the brand size.
It's hey, listen, this is complicated stuff. It can be. The principles are sound, and like we said in the very beginning, so much of it is commonsensical. But at the same time, when you have a really pretty app from the outside, everybody in the company's looking at it. It's, wow, our app is awesome. This thing is beautiful. Look at it. It's fluid. It works. But until you get underneath the hood and really understand the numbers and the margin, that's where the rubber hits the road.
And I'd like also to add, not all of it is about the margin and not all of it is about ROI. Because there are also things that are not tangible that create goodwill with customers. Sure. And some brands choose to go in that direction. They decide, hey, we cannot measure it, but we know this is the right thing to do. We believe this is the right thing to do, and we're going to continue with whatever that choice is. And some of them are completely right, just not tangible enough to measure, but it's the right thing to do. And I think it's fine. I do it in my business. I do things that are not tangibly measured, but I think they come back, and they might too. That's fine as long as it's a conscious decision, right?
Here. All right. On that, I really enjoyed this conversation, Olga.
Thank you.
Lopategui.
You got it.
All right. Go check out Olga's restaurant loyalty specialist at restaurantloyaltyspecialist.com. Of course, Olga, where else can they find you? Find you on LinkedIn? Find me on
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I always reply to everyone. Yeah. Just get connected and let's chat about loyalty and technology in the restaurant space.
Fantastic. I really appreciate the conversation. Fascinating stuff. I'll make sure I'll put the everything in the show notes for everybody. And just as a quick message to our listeners out there and subscribers, thank you very much. It means a tremendous amount to me to see that how this podcast has taken off. The views are going through the roof. Our subscribers are going up. And it just tells me that this is the kind of information that restaurant technology professionals want. They want to hear from experts that really understand their lanes. And so perfect case in point today with Olga. Thanks, Olga.